Minnesota, so that would have been 22 years ago. And these are all of the brands that I have worked on over the course of my 20 years. So it's a pretty classic marketing training in terms of my background. But now, this is my new office space. The University of St. Thomas, for those of you who have never visited the campus, is very beautiful. This is literally a shot from our campus. We are the largest private university in Minnesota, for those of you that might not be aware of that. And we like to say that we're the premier private university in the state of Minnesota. We have about 10,000 students, 3 campuses, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Rome. So anyway, you might be wondering, why does St. Thomas have a CMO? And is that a normal thing in higher ed for higher ed campuses to have CMOs? And actually, it's becoming more normal. And I've learned that the way I'm supposed to describe myself is I'm supposed to say I'm from industry. That's like the new term that the academics appreciate when I say I'm from industry and not from the academic side. But and it is becoming more of a trend. I'm the first CMO at St. Thomas, and when they formed it, this was some of the challenges that St. Thomas was facing. And I've tried to position this presentation a little bit so it's not just higher ed specific per se, but for anyone who's in a different industry. I would imagine that you could look up and look at some of these headwinds and be very familiar with those for your own industries, whichever you represent. So hopefully you recognize a little bit of yourself in that. But that's what St. Thomas was facing. And then they said, all right, we're going to try and bring a CMO in. And I was super attracted to the opportunity to build a marketing organization essentially from the ground up. And that was literally the first task that I had when I got there was my boss, who's the president of the university, said, so what structure do you want for your organization? I said, well, I would like some time to think about that just to make sure that I don't make the wrong decision. But there was such anxiety on the team to get the structure right from the very beginning that became the thing that I had to focus on right away. And this literally is a scene from our dining room. My husband is here, Ivan, who works at United Healthcare, and so he was there to witness the Post-it notes where what I was trying to do is just put, I knew these activities were things that my team needed to do, and I just put them on the wall, and I just kept organizing and reorganizing until hopefully a visual structure appeared. And it did actually from that. And so the structure that we now have is essentially an internal agency is essentially what we have with four key pillars. So we have our marketing strategy pillar, which is essentially, think of it as the account management side. So we have people that are embedded in all the schools and colleges. We have a full service creative group, which is headed by Pete Winnicke, who is our creative director, who is a veteran of a lot of the agencies here kind of in Twin Cities. It was really important to me that we have somebody that really understands advertising. And Pete has this ability to just sprinkle what I like to call his creative magic dust on everything that he does, which is why when Aaron says the work that's coming out of St. Thomas is really good, it takes a village. We've got a wonderful team there, and Pete is an important part of it. We also then have our PR communications team. We also have a couple folks in there. We have Andy Yvar, who we just stole from Weber Shandwick, who is our head of that group. We have Benita Sakar, who heads our media relations. The one and only agency that we do use on a regular basis is actually, it's a newer relationship for us. We use it on the social media side. We do have Betsy Kershaw, who is the head of BK and Company, who is our social media agency that we do use. But everything else pretty much we do internal. And then we have our own insights and analytics group. So this is the structure that we started off on. Some of the first challenges that I faced when I got there which were things that I never would have thought of, like coming from a General Mills world, is the difference between journalism and marketing, which actually wasn't something that I had really thought much about, as I said. I had, and so journalism, for some folks on the original team, you know, you need to be objective, you need to tell all the facts, you need to let the reader draw a conclusion, you need to archive things. It's important to chronicle everything that happens, whether it's good or bad for St. Thomas. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not what we're doing. We're marketers. And that doesn't mean that we're going to lie or that we're going to slid anything under the carpet. That's not it at all. But what it does mean is that we have a spotlight, and we get to choose where we're shining that spotlight. And we want to be really careful about that. And I actually did have some people on the team who were uncomfortable with that. And if any of you have read that fantastic Jim Collins book, Built to Last, where they talk about, you know, some of the characteristics of great organizations, the notion of making sure that you got the right people on the bus and that everybody is aware of where the bus is going. And so I said, well, the best thing I can do is just reaffirm, this is a marketing bus. This is the bus that we're going to be on. And if that doesn't feel comfortable, I I respect that, but you're going to want to step off the bus because this is the bus that we're on. So we did have some folks that said, thank you, but I'm not excited by that vision, and that's just part of forming a new organization and change. Another thing that we faced was just clients versus partners. So we work across all the schools and colleges and departments at St. Paul Group. We had a little bit more of what I would call an order taker mentality. So if somebody wanted, Lydia, I didn't even see you there. Another person from BK Company here too. So as somebody would want to have a piece of marketing collateral, they would call the group and they would be like, I want this picture with this headline with these bullets, and our team would say, okay, great, and we would give that back to them. And that was something that I felt was really important that we changed, because we were not there just to take an order for a piece of marketing collateral. What we need to do is to be strategic partners, and we need to understand what exactly are you trying to achieve? What objectives do you have? What audience are you trying to reach? What messages do you think actually are going to be the most relevant for that message? So that mind shift change from client to partner. And I use those words because client in my mind gives the idea that the decision-making power is with the client. I'm like, no, we're going to share that, which is why actually partner is kind of the word that we use to describe it. Even the decision-making, because when I got there too, I was like, we are going to define and clarify decision-making. We're going to use the Raskin model, and we're going to be clear about who's got the final decision. And I said, Deans, you have the final decision on strategy, but I, as CMO, have the final decision on the creative. And as we got into it, I realized, well, this isn't going to work because some of the strategies were crappy. And I was like, I don't want to work on a crappy strategy. So I would like to actually have some say into the strategies. And oh, by the way, I'm not going to make you run a piece of creative that you hate. Like, that's not going to work for you. So I'm not going to force something on you, just like I hope you don't force a strategy on me. So it became much more joint. And so there's a little bit more gray that I've learned to live with, actually, at St. Thomas than what I was used to on the General Mills side. A couple of the early things that we did was we did what we called a road to enrollment. So if any of you are familiar with path to purchase, so, that's obviously a really common tool where you take from the moment a consumer realizes they have a need for something all the way through to when they actually make their purchase decision. We mapped that as well, road to enrollment. Lots of really great insights came there from our team. And another thing that we did was we actually developed the value proposition for St. Thomas. And when I came through the door, I was looking for, and this is coming from my early General Mills days, on our creative briefs, we used to have this thing called the single-minded proposition. So the one single thing that you either wanted somebody to take away from your advertising, or the single thing that differentiates you from competition. And I was looking for that. And what I came to realize is there's no one thing. With 1,500 universities across the United States, there's probably not going to be one thing that I can tell you that in and of itself is going to be unique to St. Thomas. But what I can do is I can give you a cocktail of things that nobody else has this combination. So it's a cocktail within our value proposition. So that was a little bit of a shift to something I was used to on Cheerios. I felt like it was easier to find kind of the one thing than it is at St. Thomas. So those were some of the things that we started our journey. And then it was really about how to find remarkable creative. And we had a fantastic CMO at General Mills, a man by the name of Mark Addix. I don't know if any of you know him, but he used to drill it into our heads is that what we really want to do is be remarkable. And if you unpack that word remark, it is worthy of remark. So what we're looking for is putting things out into the world that people are going to want to talk about. And hopefully they talk about them positively. But when you are going and venturing into the world of worthy of remark, you're going to have to know that there could be some people that aren't talking about it positively. And I don't subscribe to that any publicity is good publicity. I mean, there's bad publicity that's bad publicity. But, I mean, it is important to recognize that we are trying to get people to talk about us. And so that was a shift for the university as well, because they preferred to stay in the safe zone. But the safe zone is a zone that nobody's ever going to talk about what it is you're saying. I'll give you some examples in a second. The other principle that I had to really kind of talk a lot about at the university is, and I can describe it best by using a product example. Like if you are developing a snack for kids and you go out to parents and you say, what kind of snack would you like? You're going to hear, I want high protein, I want high fiber, I want low sugar, I want low salt. They're going to give you the list of the perfect magical ingredients. And then you can go to your R&D developer and they can say, yep, I can give you that, but it's not going to taste very good. And at the end of the day, nutrition isn't nutrition unless you consume it. So it could be the perfect thing, but if you're not willing to put it in your body, it doesn't matter. And in my mind, that principle translates over to marketing. You can put all the things that you want your consumer to know about your brand, about your product into your ad, but if nobody notices, it doesn't matter because it's like there. And so that's one of the things we've really had to talk to our campus about is, I know that everything you want to say is there, but nobody's going to look at this. And so that's actually something that we've actually had to try and get around. This is an example of a sea of ads. That this is literally, you change the color, you change the logo, and it can really be any university. So this is actually what we're fighting against. And one of the first projects that we had, I'm going to show you the evolution, was we dropped our summer tuition by 50%. And so the provost came and said, I want you to advertise 50% off summer classes. And this was before Pete got here. And our very first bite at it was this ad. So it was a very traditional, like, let's just tell people 50% off summer classes. We created this, and it's actually funny. There is an actual book on higher ed marketing, and it's called 3 in a Tree. And what it means is that generally every picture in higher ed is usually 3 students under a tree. Kind of like here. But that's how ubiquitous, kind of higher ed advertising is. And actually the results bore it out. So actually our click-through rates, which is probably too small for you to see, about half of what the higher ed average was. So not great, right? At this point in time, Pete enters and says, I think we could do something really fun with this. He finds his stock photography image of somebody whose face is pushed back, almost like they've been on a roller coaster, and thought there was something really fun that we could do with that. The picture was, I think, $3,000 for us to buy, and we thought it was maybe a little too rich. We weren't sure how far our budget was going to go. So instead of buying that image, he brought in a student into our photography studios with a leaf blower. And so fashion, you can say half off. So obviously a lot more remarkable, actually, in the visual of it. And this did twice as good as the original one that we did, but still only right there at the higher ed average. So we wanted to actually even do better than that. So it was at this point, actually, that Pete's team came forward with a headline that has been pretty transformative for us, and blessed are the nerdy. And when I first heard that, I was a little like, ooh, church humor. Like, where's the line on church humor? At the university. And it wasn't true, so we actually put it into some scrappy focus groups with our inside people, and had confidence to at least go out then and at least test it. And actually, when we put this thing into digital, 5 times the reaction of what our original ad was. So we felt really good about this. And this is a perfect example of remarkable, because we have, by and large, people react to it, are very positive to it. We definitely do get detractors, people saying that we're taking the attitudes in vain and blah, blah. So we definitely do have to hold hands on that and say, yep, not everyone's going to love it. But we've actually extended this to different places. This is actually a scene from our view book. So actually, this is actually an actual student who actually dresses like that. So it wasn't even like we gave direction to dress like Urkel. Like, that's actually and so he kind of really perfectly captured that vibe. And what we're trying to do is raise the academic excellence and the academic profile of St. Thomas. So that's why that blessed are the nerdy become really important. We loved it so much that we even actually have put it into a billboard. This is a billboard in Chicago. That we actually have placed near some feeder schools in Chicago that are more likely to consider St. Thomas. Some of the Bachelors in Paradise contestants actually saw this, loved it, filmed it, and put it on their social feeds. So again, remarkable. Now we did also have a parent of a freshman who called and was up in arms that we would call her son a nerd, and actually had some alternatives for it. Actually, this is literally one of her alternatives was, "Blessed are the well-connected." Which I'm like, that broke like 2 days before the admission scandal. So I don't know whether she actually varsity blues. But the other option was, and we have a brand expression that we use at St. Thomas, all for the common good, which we really like, we're proud of. But had we put all for the common good up there, that just wouldn't have generated the same amount of things. So it's a little bit about getting kind of the university to go with us. Some other realities that we had. We know that when people are looking and thinking about universities, one of the most important things they want to know is, do you have my major? And then just how strong are the academics? And that was something that we realized, we have a little bit of work to do on that. When you ask people open-ended, what are the top 3 associations back in 2017, you have a St. Thomas. You did not end up with academic excellence in one of those. And so we knew we had a little bit of work to do. So we actually launched a TV campaign, which was our very first TV campaign since I think the early 2000s or something. We specifically chose TV because of the storytelling format, because even though it's expensive, the cost per million is the lowest, but to be able to reach the target audience that we were looking for influencers of students. And our main message was academic excellence. We actually did lean in and did a really powerful media buy. So we were in Prime, we were in the Academy Award show, which was actually really fun to see our ads. And my favorite question when people see the ads is, what agency did the ads for you? And I can say we did them all in-house. So I'm going to show you the ads right now. They hopefully click and play. One more.
While visiting my family's country to Zambia, I saw an opportunity to make a difference in the maternity healthcare system. And I'm applying what I've learned at St. Thomas as a biology of global health major. With one-on-one mentoring from professors, I've created a nonprofit that's empowering Gambian women with pre- and postnatal education. And this is just the beginning. I'm Fatimata, and I'm Ratami.
I'm a gamer with a head for business. When I realized virtual reality could fill memory voids, I had an aha moment and decided to pursue my degree at the St. Thomas Schultz School of Entrepreneurship. With my dean's help, I'm building a company that's using VR to keep memories alive for Alzheimer's patients. I'm just a sophomore, but I'm treated like a CEO because I am one. I'm Enzo, and I'm a Tom.
One more.
Building a surgical robot isn't just an amazing feat of engineering. It's an art that combines engineering and computer science with a human touch. I began exploring robotics at St. Thomas, where my professors worked with me to combine my love of mechanical and electrical engineering. Today, I develop robotic systems that enhance surgical dexterity. I create small miracles every day. I'm Dr. Ann Mayavichva, and I'm a Tom.
So those are the 3 ads that ran this year, and we just got our survey results back, which actually then go and look at the same questions that we would have asked originally. And I'm happy to say that academic excellence is now in the top 3, right up there with Catholic, right up there, unfortunately, with high cost, but we're working on that. The university, so we've done a really, these ads are doing actually what we intended to do. So super excited about some of the progress there. One of the things that we have had to contend a little bit with is we've got a lot of people that aren't used to giving creative feedback. And when we come forward with some of these remarkable ideas, this is actually one of a really fun cartoon from Tom Fishborn about just the various ways that people get creative feedback, and you probably should look at these, would recognize yourselves in some of them. So how did we get a campus and folks that weren't as used to delivering creative feedback, kind of like off of this? And one of the critiques that we were hearing initially was, we're a serious institution. People are like, this is a Cheerios, Kymm. This is a $50,000 a year purchase, that for many families could be as much as a home. And that is true, and I respect all of that. But again, if we're not going to break through, it doesn't matter. And so I said, how can we help people feel a little bit more comfortable and understand, what it is that we're trying to do? And so we thought, well, let's see, is there an example of another serious institution that has had to kind of like speak a little bit differently from a marketing standpoint in order to break through with a compelling message? And we really didn't have to look any further than the Basilica. If you think about the Basilica Block Party and what they've done, this is actually one of the very first ads from the Basilica Block Party. So for those of you that remember there was a cassette tape, I think it's called TDK or something. Maxell. And this was a tape off of that ad, which was actually kind of fun. So, and this was, and then the guy that actually, the Reverend at the Basilica, talks about the fact that he knows that it's a little bit irreverent, but recognize that to bring in a different audience, we were going to have to do something a little bit different. So hopefully to give people at the Catholic Church can do it, we can do it too, to give people a little bit more confidence that, hey, we're not completely crazy. Sorry for the pixels on this. This was just an image I grabbed off the internet. But another example that we like to show people is from Loyola University of Chicago. So this is a transit ad, bus stop. And the headline is, "We want you." And then underneath it says, "Now go away." And it's talking about their study abroad programs, which is a really fun way to talk about study abroad. Because if you think about, 56% of our students going out study abroad, how many people would have actually looked at that as the headline, kind of like versus this. So we're trying to show our campus examples of these kinds of things. This was an older ad that actually played on our mission statement. You know, all for the common good is there. Think, act, work. Lines from our mission statement. Okay, now we've got 4 in the tree. In this one, as you can see. So this also, again, was pre-Pete. So this was actually one of the first ads that we worked on. I think you might have actually worked on this even before you accepted the job at St. Thomas officially. And it was just sort of like, let's focus on outcomes. You know, so this one here is all about, you know, get a diploma and a place to being it with 95% of our folks are situated, you know, kind of within 1 year of graduation. You know, so being able to focus on this. Now, the funny thing about this ad is when we first showed this to the admissions team, the pushback was, well, parents don't want to pay $50,000 for their kid to play guitar. Like this literally was some of the stuff that we were hearing, which I know Pete was like, but I thought we had a music program. But, you know, like, again, some of the literal stuff, we had to be like, again, this is breakthrough. This is something that we're actually trying to go through. So these are just some of the, those are just some of the challenges that we've kind of had. Just to sum up, I tried to just encapsulate some of the learning, things from CPG, consumer packaged goods that do translate in my mind, or have translated across industries for me. And then I've got a list of things that don't. But a lot of these things we've already talked about, the value equations, the journeys, the principles, how important it is to actually start with an insight. That wasn't a discipline that we really had at St. Thomas before. The importance of even starting with an objective, that also kind of wasn't something that we were used to. But the matrix environment that I was very used to at General Mills is very similar. So it's almost like the whole interplay between administrative faculty and staff was very normal for me just because of that. So there is value in the matrix while you're in it. It may feel frustrating, but there's a lot of organizations that pattern that. So it actually is good for future transferable skills. Things that actually didn't translate over, you know, at General Mills, marketing runs the company. That's where the CEOs come from. That is the decision-making power. You know that when you are in marketing, nobody asks you about the value of marketing. I've asked about the value of marketing all the time. You know, and you know, so this notion, isn't marketing the greatest? You know, it's just not something that I hear intuitively, but over time we're building that, and I feel like that's an invitation to our team to show that we are adding value. So that actually really doesn't bother me. It's just something I have to remember a little bit more, that maybe I have to do a little bit more laying of the foundation that I would have had to do. We talked about the single-minded proposition. You know, our budgets aren't big. You know, when I ran the post-grad business at General Mills, I think I can say this publicly, I had, my marketing budget was $125 million. So it was very large. Like, I'm not looking at any marketing budget remotely, you know, within those, maybe some decimal points over to the left. But what I found though is that, and I know it sounds cliche, but the ideas, the good ideas get funded. So even if in our central budget we don't have enough money, if the idea is good enough, like with the TV ads that you saw, we can go to the different schools and colleges and we can get them to gin up money. And I really, really believe that creativity is best when it's constrained, or at least it's unleashed more when it's constrained. And if you haven't seen it, there's a really terrific TED Talk. It's called Embrace the Shake, and it talks about an artist who actually used to do this pointillist. So it's this very, very specific kind of art that you put very specific dots, and then when you get back from it, you can see the whole. Well, then he had developed a neurological problem, and he wasn't, his hand shook, so he wasn't able to. And just his journey of like what that unlocked in terms of this new era of creativity for him. I feel like there's a ton of learning in that for all of us that work on the marketing side, is that sometimes when those constraints come in, your creativity goes up. And I've definitely found that to be the case. Our production dollars, I mean, the agencies that we would work with at General Mills would tell me, you can't make an ad for under $500,000. Well, I will tell you, we can, we've done it for a lot less than that. Research budgets, we have students all over campus, so we're having an opportunity to kind of bring those in. And the really refreshing thing is not having to pitch all the time, like pitch and pitch and pitch off the line. Like, I remember actually going back to developing the recommendation for our structure and going into my boss with just some ideas. It was basically not much further along than the Post-its on my dining room wall. And I said, this is what I'm thinking about. And she said, great, go for it. I'm like, go for it. Like, I haven't costed it out yet. I haven't looked at the 5 options that I'm not going to go with, you know, just so that you can feel confident that we're going with the one. And that actually has been super refreshing, and it's led to speed. we moved so fast that people told me that higher ed was going to feel slow, and that has not been the case. So probably all of our team members would say that's not the case, and it's been really refreshing. So those are some of the things. There are definitely things that we still have left to do. Getting visibility outside of Minnesota has been challenging for us. But now that we got kicked out of our athletic conference, maybe there'll be some opportunities, as we think about a different athletic conference to kind of grow that. The other challenge that we have, quite frankly, is just diversity. We want to augment that not only with our students, but our faculty and staff, and it's imperative that we do that. Some of you might know we had a racial vandalism incident on campus last year, and that has really galvanized the campus. We have a very strong anti-racism action plan going on now, and we really hope that all the different things that we're doing on that front will hopefully help us address this. But didn't want to leave you with everything's rosy. There's definitely things that we have to work on, just like any organization. And these, in my mind, are some of the top two that our team is spending time focused on and thinking about. But with that, I am done. I think I do have a thank you. Oh, nope, I don't. Anyway, you're supposed to say thank you.
Can we ask a question? I would guess the getting kicked out of the conference is probably helpful. You're on a national stage everywhere. That's all they're talking about at St. Thomas. So maybe that's where you're capitalizing on the national stage about actually getting kicked out of the conference.
Yeah.
Maybe a boost to the marketing. I don't know if you can take advantage of that. Being kicked out is.
I would say that the way in which we kicked out and the way in which we handled it, there was a lot of preparation that went into that. And yes, I would agree with the way it unfurled. Yes, actually, we are pleased with the national coverage and pleased with the national narrative that we got kicked out of the conference for being too good. Yeah, that is something that will hopefully helpful. That was certainly not a strategy. We very much wanted to stay within the MIAC and did everything we could to stay there. So in no way were we trying to force that particular outcome. But do agree that when one door closes, another door opens, and it is an opportunity for us. So, yeah.
School like St. Thomas especially has an extremely strong alumni base, strong and powerful, I would say.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, you talked about like faculty staff and your matrixing initiatives. How often or how do you navigate when that alumni voice rises and tries to kind of dictate what you do from the fringes?
Yeah, our alums actually by and large are really, really supportive. And so I'm just trying to think over the last 3 years if there's been any instance where the alums have been on a really different page in mass. I mean, obviously you've got individuals that are, could be on different pages, but the alums have been pretty supportive. There is a different group that actually communicates to alums, not my group, but that is an opportunity that we've identified, that pulling our groups closer together and applying a lot of the principles that we've used on the marketing side with our alum communications. One of the things that we were able to do when you think about our newsroom and just some of that change from journalism over to marketing, our criteria for what we talk about became not just, is it interesting, but is it interesting and does it do something, to advance a key message about St. Thomas? We are now working with the alumni group to take those thoughts and to see whether we can actually retool some of those alum communications so that we can maybe unleash the alumni group in a little more powerful way than we have been to continue to be great brand ambassadors. It's one of the reasons why we created the value proposition, because if you ask 10 different people to describe St. Thomas, what are the things about St. Thomas, you might get 10 different answers. By putting it all into one and being like, okay, from a prospective student's point of view, these are the things that they most want to know about. By educating people about what that is, even if they're using their own words to bring it to life, they're at least staying on message. It's an opportunity for us to take that to the alums and to enroll them in some of that. But in general, it's 110,000 person group. It's really an amazing. I didn't grow up in Minnesota, so St. Thomas, I had to kind of learn it as I went. It is such an amazing group of people that are very powerful, and I think we can do more with them than what we do.
I'm a member actually of the Alumni Advisory Board, and so I echo everything. I know you people spoke to us earlier this year, so I've been a member for the last 4 years. And we're aligned through Jessica, who heads up alumni relations and manages and oversees our Alumni Advisory Board. We have task force that are very much aligned with the initiatives of the university and kind of can bring that voice and kind of speak out and reach out to our alumni.
Would you agree though? I was trying to think, can you think of an example of when the alums have been on a wildly different place than the rest of the, I mean, I feel like there's good, and perhaps some of that is because of the communication that's happening and some of the work that your team is doing, but it does seem like it's been a pretty good partnership.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that. Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. Kymm, how long have you been at this?
3 years,
And you came in as a CMO.
I did.
And how many people did you bring with you in that 3 years?
Yeah, well, so I inherited a group of about 22 that was part of a group that at the time they called University Relations, which had a bunch of different functions kind of like within that. We are now 52. We did not add headcount to the university. We just reallocated the headcount that was already sitting for marketing purposes in different places and centralized it. So it wasn't as if I was able to double, kind of
So there
the.
was no budget pushback?
No, that there was budget implication because we did not have the right skill sets. We did not have all the skills that we needed in order to be able to evolve into a modern marketing organization. And so we did probably, I would say, 75% of our jobs fundamentally changed just what they do. And that was really hard actually for the organization. I don't know that I really realized how difficult that part of the transformation would be. As people really tried to struggle with, wow, my job has really fundamentally changed. Do I stay and reskill or do I go and do something else? My leadership team, so my direct reports now are all, I've hired all of them. So I don't have anyone I didn't bring them necessarily with me, but I was able to, so Pete and Andy, and then I have 2 others on my leadership team. Both of those 2 also did have General Mills somewhere in their background, so they were at least familiar with the world from which I came from, but we hadn't worked directly together. But yes, there were budget implications, and that was the blessing that, again, from my boss, she was like, this is what you need to do. It's part of the 2020 strategic plan. I think had I been presented with you can't do anything about the budget, I would have been much more hamstrung because our main spending is on people, and what our people can do, and our savings for the university then comes in the form of what we can be able to do internally and pay, not have to pay outside fees. So
When you guys got kicked out, I always thought the right line would be got kicked upstairs.
We'll see what happens when we find out where we're going. But actually, for church humor, that would be funny. So, other questions? Yeah.
So as you talk about transitioning from CPG into other industries, and like you, I have a CPG background, and I've seen different cultures where marketing has a different function. What kind of tips or techniques did you use to help the other peer group of yours evolve to a modern marketing organization in terms of their thinking, and how do they go through things? Because obviously there's a big transition that's got to take place. And what techniques did you use?
Yeah. I would say the one thing that I could not have done without is the support from the top. So in some respects, I almost think of Julie Sullivan as, being in the jungle with a machete right in front of me, knocking down all of the junk. So clearing a path, for our group, because from the very top, she said marketing was important and marketing matters, and we believe marketing can add value. And if I hadn't had that, I think the rest of it would have been a lot harder. And actually, when I was looking at the job, considering, I was paid very close attention to where marketing reported in, and the fact that it reported in to the senior university said a lot about the way the university was willing to put. So that was something. One of the other things that we did, though, is it's like an hour presentation that we have that we went out to all of our partners. And actually some of the slides from the roadshow you saw here today, where we were trying to demonstrate what we're trying to do. So what is remarkable creative? What does that look like? And explaining some of what we were, so that when we were pushing back, people understood why we were trying to push back, and it came with it. But the most important thing is just results. Like when you have a story to tell that actually gets all the way there, like the example that I was telling you about the 50% off summer tuition. So I had this fabulous case story of where we were going with our creative and changing it all the way along. And I thought, it is going to suck if we do not hit our registration goals. I'm not going to be able to use this case study. We did. We exceeded them. So things like that gives the university confidence that, this marketing thing can work. So being able to kind of like talk a little bit about that, but it's hard though, actually, because you're the marketers and you're almost like marketing, and that doesn't always feel good to an academic who's already skeptical that you're spinning anyway, and now you're just trying to like prove the value of your organization. So we do have to be very careful about it. We've got other people on campus that will produce reports every year of like all the different things that they've done and send it out to everybody. We deliberately don't do that because, well, ours would look a lot better. And so that right there would look like we were maybe using university resources inappropriately, perhaps. But the other thing is we just don't want to look like we have to be careful. We have to find more genuine, more authentic ways to kind of get that message out there. But getting all the way through to what we're doing, this is how we're adding value, is how we are one by one transforming and just recognizing and not being frustrated with the fact that people are going to come at it from a different mind frame. They're not going to immediately kind of like understand what that's going to do. I actually worked internationally for a bit. I was down in Mexico City for 3 years running the Latin America business, and it was with a joint venture that Jonah Mills has with Nestle. And Nestle, I remember this one market manager in particular, he was like, we were spending a lot of money on marketing, but we were having to discount the cereals because of the very heavy price war that we were in with Kellogg's. And I remember him looking at me being like, this marketing isn't working. Like, why don't we just take all of these dollars that we're spending on marketing and funnel it into price, because that seems like it would make more sense from a business model standpoint, which was kind of the first time I'd run into somebody and like, well, but don't you believe in marketing? Don't you see kind of like what marketing can do when it really is unleashed? So it's not being frustrated by that. It's trying to address the case and explain that it can mean more, and that emotional appeal is more than just a price point, kind of like at the shelf. But it is a journey, and it is one that it's taken a long time. I don't know if anyone else from the team, if you guys would have anything else that you would add to that.
No,
No.
I mean, we don't deal with 8 different schools that make up the universities that we do work for, the university. And a lot of them have been there a very long time, so they're very literal. And that would be that, I think that is the biggest hurdle we face, is they take things very, very literal, and trying to get them out of that mode is probably our biggest challenge in the day-to-day.
Yeah, one of my favorite headlines that never saw the light of day was for our executive education programs that we had over in the business school. And one of the headlines was, the cure for middle management, is kind of what that was. And there was a very dark fear on behalf of our partner that we were offending, because we have a lot of people that aspire to middle management and who are in middle management and feel fine about being in middle management, which I totally get. It's like, but it's a Dilbert cartoon. We're trying to kind of play a little bit on that, but that's some of what we sometimes are up against, and we just try and point it out. The other thing, I guess, is just the trust over time. Like in the beginning, I think people were, especially since a lot of us came from the outside, we came from industry, there was a lot of mistrust necessary. Over the years, we've tried really, really, really hard to stay close, to listen, to not go around people, to try and work with them where they are and to try and get there, and leave things by the wayside, like that ad that I think actually would have worked well. But it's like, I'm not going to follow spirit for that one. I'm going to follow spirit for Blessed Are the Nerdy, but I'm not going to follow spirit for that. So just kind of picking and choosing our battles. Thank you. Good question. Yeah. Oh, Mariana.
Yes. So your team is developing this new voice of the brand, this new position. Now there are so many people in higher education that use your brand, that use your voice a lot more than in CPG, right? In CPG, the brand kind of leads the voice, and maybe the retailers do something with it. The consumer may post on social media, but here you have so many people that need to align on that voice.
Yeah.
How do you manage that alignment of all those different audiences, from alumni to faculty to current students?
Yeah, well, in some respects, you're right. I mean, the brand is really, in some respects, owned by the graduates and by what they're doing, kind of like out into the world and their stories, and we have to be really respectful of that, because at the end of the day, that is what our university exists to do. Some of the ways that we try and manage it is, as I was saying, the value proposition, which has been presented to the alumni board, but I don't think it's gone much further than that. So we have some work we could maybe be doing there. It's things like our TV ads that we've done, where we are presenting a point of view and people are looking at it and like, oh yeah. And so then maybe they're adapting some of those messages that they see within it. At this point, we are very much the academic excellence just in general, and then awareness of some of our schools is another thing. Like we have a School of Engineering, which is excellent, that we've had for quite a number of years. And less than 2 years ago, less than 50% of Minnesotans even knew we had a School of Engineering. So that's one of the reasons why they were featured in our ads. And so now we're over that 50% margin. And it's just making sure that we're just repeating some of these key messages that we want to get across. Another big thing is we're undertaking a website redesign, which is a huge, massive website redesign. We have so many pages. Part of the reason why is because we didn't have an intranet. So like everything we wanted our faculty and staff to know about St. Thomas sat on our .edu for anyone to see. So we're actually, we've actually got an intranet now where we're trying to strip that content, the stuff that's, about our employee benefit packages, all those things, making sure that they're over on the internet, leaving the .edu a little bit more free to communicate some of these messages and do some of that. So we're trying to just show by the way we're communicating the kinds of things that we think are important, but very much recognizing, you see it in social, again, just the dialogue that's happening, and there's things we can control and things that we can't control, but in general, it's very positive. Like we've been pretty lucky on that front. It has been pretty positive. That's a good question, and we can't control all of it.
Could you talk a little bit about your use of social? I know you introduced your folks here. Do you use it for prospective students, or is it more about engaging your stakeholders, or both?
Yes, the answer is yes, because it's like an and. We actually think about it differently in terms of the different platforms. And so like our Facebook page, as an example, lots of people that are active on that. I would argue that that's perhaps a little bit more the alumni group, like active there. When you think about our current students, it's probably more Snapchat, Instagram. Prospective students, Snapchat, Instagram, but prospective students aren't necessarily likely to follow the university. They're much more likely to follow students at the university so that they can actually see what life is like through somebody that they know. So it's about us trying to amplify people at the university that we think would be interesting. LinkedIn, though, is a huge social channel for us. That actually is one of our most powerful social channels, and we use that for all sorts of, there's our alums, there's our influencers, we're doing all sorts of things on LinkedIn to be able to reach out. So it's a many-pronged strategy. And, we sit down every month and we talk about, what are we trying to promote, this particular month. And sometimes it's, with graduation, it's outcomes. Right now, we're focused on the beginning of school and what it's like to transition some of these families and these kids for the first time to our campus. So it varies, but we have a wide variety of folks that we're trying to reach. I don't know, that's here, Olivia. Do you have anything you'd want to add to that?
I would just say with St. Thomas, or I think higher ed in general, very specific to St. Thomas, it's a challenge of abundance. There's so many stories to tell and so many channels to fill. So many of our other work, it's like, what am I going to say today? That is not the problem at St. Thomas. It's like, what are we going to say in the right channel, and making sure we're really kind of driving home that message. And we've learned a lot and been able to share a lot of feedback. And I think we're really dialed in the right channel, right audience. It's so fun though, because of the newsroom background. It's brilliant writers and great creatives. And so we have this rich content to work with, which is super unique.
We're really lucky on every respect.
Good question on that. Obviously, because of budget, which has for you guys who are engineering as well, when you make the decision to step outside of that and say, hey, I think we need to go outside of who we got here. Obviously, we're doing that with social. What makes you think about doing that?
Yeah, so in general, our instinct is to try and keep it inside and hire the right person who has a modern skill set who can then come in and teach the university something. We find from just a cost-effective perspective, it's better for us to kind of try and do that. We probably now, as I mentioned, so 75% of our original jobs underwent significant change in terms of what we were asking people to do. So the turnover over the last 3 years across the team is actually been pretty high. So right now we have people who have had really relevant recent skill sets. I think it will be interesting as we move forward and as we evolve and as people stay in place longer. How do you keep that fresh? How do you make sure that you're staying on top of the latest and greatest? I do think that will be something that we'll need to think about, because I do believe external offers a lot of that. So how do we stay more external? It just hasn't been what we've had to worry about now, but I do think that is an interesting challenge for the future as we think about that. But it's just because so many of our folks have been recently from other places, we've had a lot of that external thinking that's come with them.
Is your basic market non-St. Thomas students?
Is our basic
Your focus non-St.
prospective students? Yes, the focus from my team is on prospective students. We also have prospective students and those who influence them. You know, so we have those. There's a lot of parents that are filling out the application, you know, kind of like on behalf of their kids, right? So we want to make sure that, you know, as influencers and prospective students. Originally, when we first started, I said, you know, our job, our vision for our group is to excite people about St. Thomas. That's what we're all about, and primarily it's to excite external audiences about St. Thomas. But as we've gotten better, there's lots and lots of requests for us to help out with internal communications as well, which I resisted as long as I possibly could, and then my boss told me last year, you will do it. But the good news is I feel like the team is now at a place where we can think about that, you know, where we can have a little bit more bandwidth, whereas in the beginning, it was like drinking from a fire hose. So prospective students and influencers remain the most important. Donors is another audience that we actually spend a lot of time with our folks, our partners in development, thinking about. Alumni are becoming more important. Didn't have a chance to think as much about them in the beginning, but with Jessica, the woman who heads our alumni program at St. Thomas, we're very much trying to be a support and a thought leader to her on the alumni side. And then with student affairs, who has a lot of our student communications, we partner with them as well. But yes, our primary and our website, so I tried, you know, is prospective students and their influencers. So as much as there's employers of St. Thomas grads, we have so many opportunities for different audiences, and we do work across all of those, but we try to stay focused on our most important.
I think we should wrap it up here. It's 8:45, a little bit longer than we tend to go, and in spite of the speed of your delivery.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I hope people were able to
No,
follow.
it's been like a fire hose of information here, and that's real, no, that's excellent. That's funny. The next thing we make is Amanda House, she's the executive director of the Midwest St. Children's Research Hospital, and that'll be on September 19th. That's going to be a happy hour, which means it's not 7:30 in the morning, it's 4:30 in the afternoon. That might
I
be-
didn't get that slide.
I know. So
That's
please come.
That's very good.
And if you want to be on the list for Think and Link and you're not already, you can talk to Austin on the way out, or there's a fishbowl, drop your business card in there. You can also connect with Aaron. He's ubiquitous, so you should be able to find him on LinkedIn or somewhere else. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you.